Hello friends, behind me are two ash trees, and I thought today we'd have something of a conversation with them. A lot of times when we're learning about trees, we want to know that name. We want to be able to say ash, oak, maple. But that name, that's just a word that we put on to this creature. And it tells us the tiniest little bit about it. In fact, in a way, it doesn't tell us much at all. It's only a designation. After learning the name of a tree, we want to learn its properties. What is this wood good for? Does it have medicinal qualities? Does it have edible qualities? But today, I want to take a different perception and ask these trees something about how they've grown. I could probably easily do an hour-long video on just one of these trees and all the things that it can tell us. But today, we're just going to focus on the growth of the limbs and how they speak to us. Reading the limbs of trees can tell us about the history of a forest or a field. It can tell us about prevailing weather patterns. It can tell us the direction if we can't see the sun. There's so much wrapped up just in the way that the limbs of a tree grow. I'm indebted to Tom Wessels, Tristan Gooley, and my own experience just growing up in the woods and observing nature for the lessons that I'm going to share today. The first thing we can notice when we look at a tree like this is that all of this growth loves to go to the south. We can see the sun, if you can imagine, it comes across here and it's going to set actually right about over there in the summer. In this tree, it's responding likewise. Here's sunrise. Up here, late morning, midday, afternoon. In this limb, night. Gathering sun all the way around it. So this tree is fairly simple to read. But when we step over here, things might get more confusing. This tree has to respond to the shade created by this one. But let's see if we can see the same pattern. Look at this. Isn't this interesting down here? This low limb that can catch the morning sun. As the sun moves up here, it's largely blocked. Still, this limb reaches up and catches through that gap a little bit of sun before it disappears behind the leaves. Then this tree hasn't put out a lot here, but has centered its growth this way, so it can catch that evening sun. Here, evening sun, and here, reaching out, again, gathering that evening sun. This limb, which has such a nice southern view, is helping to create a response in this tree where there's not a lot of growth. We have one little limb growing up here, but largely an empty space. In trying to understand why this limb is sticking out like this and why this other tree is responding in this way, often we go straight to the idea of competition. We've been trained in culturally through the ideas of Darwin that nature is all about competition. New science is challenging that and is showing us that there's also a lot of cooperation that goes on. It may be that we humans are a bit wired for noticing conflict. It's very easy, for instance, for a lot of us to say, oh, there's so much conflict in the world, there's so many wars, there's so much violence, and to somehow not notice all the cooperation that goes on. If you consider just today, all the people that had to cooperate and work together to make your life the way it is, it might start to help us recognize that there's at least as much cooperation going on among humans as there is conflict, and possibly a lot more cooperation than conflict. However you want to interpret this is up to you. Is this conflict between these two trees? Is it cooperation? Is there a communication going on between these two trees that we don't yet fully understand, as we're starting to find out through the fungal networks that create the wood wide web? This tree is older, so that limb, we could say, was there first, and maybe we're just seeing a simple cause and effect sort of relationship. But this tree isn't a lot older, and so it does make one wonder, what exactly is going on here to create this very evident growth to the sun and a space where that tree is not growing limbs. That's the first little step in understanding tree limbs. There's a communication, if you will, as I've been speaking about in past videos, that's happening between this tree and a celestial object that is very, very far away out through space. That sun creating the light, the lifeblood for this tree. And the sun moving through a pattern in the sky, in the tree forming itself and shaping itself to speak to the sun. And the ash behind it having to find a way to speak to the sun that works best with the presence of the tree that is essentially between it and the sun. Now, with that simple little lesson, I'd urge you to go out, find 2 trees in an open area, and see if you can see how those trees are responding or communicating with the sun. See if you can find the limbs that are greeting the morning, the limbs that speak to the sun in the late morning, in the afternoon, in the evening. And then, if there is indeed a tree behind it, as we have here, how has that tree shaped itself to speak to the sun in morning, in afternoon, in evening? This, my friends, is the very first step in starting to read tree limbs. We can explore this more as time goes on if you're enjoying it. But in the comments, share your observations, share what you see, and I can't wait to read what you discover. Love to you all, my friends. I'll talk with you in the comments.